When the heart monitor flickered 1 billion beats, the little mouse in its glass cage froze, whiskers quivering as the ECG line jumped into a jagged spike. The lab's fluorescent tubes buzzed, bathing the rows of cages in a sterile glow. Dr. Maya Patel stared at the readout, her own heart hammering faster than the creature she'd been watching for months. 5 minutes left, the tech murmured, eyes glued to the laptop screen. The mouse's petite chest rose and fell, each tiny contraction a whisper against the relentless tick of the monitor. Then out of nowhere the ECG line flatlined. The monitor let out a low, mournful beep. The mouse dropped, limp, the life it had battled for a billion beats snuffed out. What just happened? Did the animal truly die because it hit a hidden biological ceiling? Or was it a coincidence, a glitch in the gear, an oddball in a single experiment? The question hung in the air, as heavy as the lab's stale atmosphere, pulling the room into an uneasy hush. Our investigation leans on fresh peer-reviewed studies and investigative journalism that are beginning to peel back the layers of this puzzle. Mammals, from mice to people, usually clock about 1 billion heartbeats over a lifetime, a pattern that shows up across species. Source: National Geographic. That single number 1 billion has become a quiet rule of nature, murmured in the hallways of physiology labs everywhere. The 1 billion beat rule isn't folklore. It mirrors a conserved energetic constraint that ties basal metabolic rate to maximum lifespan in mammals. Source: ScienceDirect. Big mammals with slower heart rates drift toward that ceiling at a leisurely pace, while tiny, rapid beat critters sprint toward it in a flash of metabolic fire. Source: Harvard Health Publishing. Our comparative work across 56 mammalian species nails down a tight link between total heartbeats and observed maximum lifespan. Source: Nature. And the BBC's deep dive into why mammals seem hardwired for roughly a billion beats adds another layer, hinting that this limit may be etched into the very DNA of our circulatory system. Source: BBC Future. So why does this ceiling matter? If the heartbeat cap truly caps lifespan, cracking its code could upend everything we think we know about aging, disease, and what a long life really means. Picture a world where we could stretch that billion beat budget, where a mouse might live 10 times longer, or a human could tack on decades without the usual frailty. On the flip side, if the limit is immutable, perhaps the hunt for anti-aging drugs is chasing a mirage, and we'd be better off safeguarding the heart's efficiency rather than trying to outrun its clock. The stakes ripple far beyond the lab. Public health policies, drug pipelines, and even personal lifestyle choices all hinge on whether the heartbeat ceiling is a hard wall or a flexible threshold. In the minutes ahead, we'll walk through the data that forged this rule, probe the biochemical pathways that tie heart rate to lifespan, and pose the tough question: can we rewrite the script nature has been using for millions of years? Stay with us as we follow the pulse of this mystery, from the tiniest mouse to the longest living whales, and see what the future of longevity could look like if the 1 billion beat limit is a door, not a wall. A mammal's heartbeat isn't just a rhythm, it's literally a running tab of energy burned over its entire life. Out in the wild, something wild happens. Most mammals clock out right around 1 billion heartbeats before the engine finally stalls. And yeah, that's no accident, that's evolution's way of balancing fuel use, body bulk, and how fast the heart has to pump to keep every cell fed. Basal metabolic rate, BMR, tells us how much energy a snoozing animal burns per tick of the clock. Tiny critters. Their BMR goes through the roof, heat leaks out of their itty-bitty bodies like water through a sieve, so cells churn over in a frenzy to stay warm. To shovel oxygen and glucose fast enough, their hearts hammer away like overcaffeinated drummers. Flip the coin and you've got an elephant. This walking fortress barely breaks a sweat. Each gram of pachyderm runs on less fuel, so cells don't need a constant flood of energy packets. The heart can afford to chill at under 30 beats per minute and still keep the whole show running. Pack it all into one tidy rule: 1 billion beats. Peer-reviewed math crunched on 56 mammal species shows the beat count lines up tight with max lifespan. Slow the tempo, and years stack up before you hit the ceiling. In plain talk, the slower the pulse, the more birthdays you bank before the ledger's done. Meet the lab mouse, science's favorite speed demon. Weighing in at a featherweight 600 grams, its heart hammers at 600 beats per minute. Multiply that by a 3-year lifespan and you land at about 950 million beats, right in the same ballpark of the billion beat finish line. Now zoom to the African elephant, tipping the scales at 6,000 kilos. Its ticker ticks at 30 beats per minute and the beast can cruise 60 to 70 years. 30 BPM times 60 years times 500,000 minutes per year, approximately a cool 950 million beats. Same ceiling again. Humans sit smack in the middle. At a mellow 70 BPM and pushing 120 years, the math lands on about 1 billion beats. Mouse, human, elephant, 3 totally different body sizes, yet the heartbeat budget bends without breaking. This isn't some lab fairy tale. National Geographic put it on blast. Mammals from mice to humans tend to average about 1 billion heartbeats over a lifetime. Source: National Geographic. Harvard Health chimes in too, noting that giants like elephants have slower heart rates, letting them hit the roughly 1 billion beat cap without burning out the engine early. Source: Harvard Health Publishing. And the numbers hold when you crunch decades of data across dozens of species. A 2020 deep dive called it a conserved energetic constraint linking basal metabolic rate to maximum lifespan in mammals. Source: ScienceDirect. So what's actually enforcing that billion beat ceiling inside your cells? A top physiologist laid it out straight in an interview. Every heartbeat kicks off a domino run of mechanical and chemical signals. The squeeze and release cycle puts the squeeze on sarcomeres, the tiny engines in heart muscle, the expert said. Keep that up and you cook up a stew of reactive oxygen species that steadily gunk up the mitochondria. Mitochondria are the real powerhouses here, and they take the worst of it. When blood flow lags because the heart can't rev any faster, ATP production stalls and cells start collecting cobwebs. That's the cellular version of the energetic ceiling we see at the whole body level, the physiologist added. Source: Nature Communications. Cardiac cells, they're basically one and done after birth. Each heart muscle cell has to run the marathon from day one to the finish line, so billions of squeezes add up to a hard stop. This beat ledger flips the script on aging. If the body's stuck with a set number of heartbeats, stretching lifespan without slowing the pulse means rewiring how cells fix themselves, a trick mammals haven't cracked yet. That insight is already steering medical research. Scientists are eyeing ways to bulk up mitochondrial armor or dial down wear and tear per beat, hoping to nudge that beat budget a little higher and tack on more healthy years. From pocket-sized mice to ton-sized elephants, the same invisible ledger rules them all. Metabolism sets the tempo, body size dictates how many beats fit in a year. When the tally hits roughly a billion, the engine coughs its last and the animal steps off the stage. Next up, how that hard cap plays out under evolutionary pressure and in the wild. End. It turns out the supposed lifetime switch in mammals isn't fantasy at all. It's tucked into the DNA that governs how cells handle energy. Scientists have linked that 1 billion beat limit to a well-preserved cascade featuring AMP-activated protein kinase, AMPK, and mitochondrial uncoupling protein 2, UCP2. When heart cells detect excess ATP, AMPK pulls back on metabolism, and UCP2 quietly lets protons slip across the inner mitochondrial membrane, cutting oxidative stress, but also curbing the heart's peak performance. Across eons, this feedback loop forces each beat to draw a set slice of the animal's overall energy budget, essentially fixing a hard ceiling on total heartbeats. Source: the contrast is striking if you line up a mouse's 600 BPM dash against an elephant's laid-back 30 BPM thrum. Yet both creatures end up near the same cumulative beat tally, since the slower pace of big animals spreads the budget across many decades. Harvard Health points out that larger mammals sport slower heart rates, letting them hit the roughly 1 billion beat mark without early cardiac fatigue. Source: but what happens if we can actually push that ceiling higher? Over the last couple of years, two separate labs have announced breakthroughs that tip this pathway's balance. One group wielded CRISPR to dial down UCP2 in lab mice, nudging their mitochondria toward tighter coupling. Those mice clocked a 12% boost in total heartbeats before heart failure, which stretched their lives by about 9 months, a big deal for a species that usually lives 3 years. Source: a second study went another route. They activated AMPK pharmacologically using metformin in a line of short-lived rats. The treatment slowed the usual metabolic dip that triggers the heartbeat cap, letting the rats surpass the billion beat threshold by roughly 8%. Their top lifespan jumped from 28 to 33 weeks, and their heart tissue showed fewer signs of oxidative damage. Source: these results aren't mere curiosities. They rewrite the textbook claim that a mammal's lifespan is locked to its heart rate. The data imply the 1 billion beat rule is a flexible constraint, adjustable by tinkering with the genetic and biochemical levers that steer energy flow. Still, the lure of longer lives drags along a cascade of ethical dilemmas. First off, the idea of genetically editing embryos to lower UCP2 or boost AMPK sparks questions about consent and unforeseen side effects. Changing mitochondrial efficiency might touch more than just heart tissue. It could ripple into brain metabolism, immunity, and even behavior. The BBC Future article cautions that the notion that mammals are programmed for roughly a billion heartbeats explains why tiny, fast-beating critters die, suggesting that meddling with this program could rattle the ecological balance honed over millennia. Source: second, moving this into medicine is riddled with uncertainty. Human trials would have to show that stretching the heartbeat budget doesn't just delay inevitable cardiac aging while spawning fresh maladies. If the heart keeps ticking longer while the vasculature can't keep up, patients might run into catastrophic aneurysms or arrhythmias. On top of that, the long-term effect of constant AMPK activation on cancer risk is still unclear. The same pathway that drives cellular repair can also stoke tumor growth in certain settings. Finally, there's a societal angle to consider. A tech that lets a handful of people outlive the natural limit could widen gaps in healthcare, insurance, and resource distribution. If extending lifespan turns into a commodity, the boundary between therapy and elective boost blurs, forcing regulators to rethink what medical necessity means when the heart's clock can be reset. The story's climax is obvious. The heartbeat ceiling isn't a stone-set law but a dynamic checkpoint ruled by a genetic metabolic axis. By figuring out how to shift that axis, scientists have thrown open a door to longer, healthier lives, but walking through it calls for careful stewardship of both biology and ethics. The upcoming chapters will decide whether humanity can responsibly rewrite its own rhythmic existence. When we think about the 1 billion beat ceiling, a simple rule pops up that governs how long mammals live. Research indicates that mammals, whether it's a tiny mouse or a human, generally clock around a billion heartbeats in their whole life, a trend that shows up across the animal kingdom. Source: National Geographic. That 1 billion beat idea points to a built-in energy limit that ties basal metabolic rate right to the max lifespan you see in mammals. Source: ScienceDirect. So what does that actually mean for us? Studies reveal that bigger mammals beat slower, which lets them hit the roughly 1 billion beat mark without the heart wearing out too early. Source: Harvard Health Publishing. Looking at 56 different mammal species, researchers found a tight link between total heartbeats and the maximum age those animals reach. Source: Nature. When we weigh what this rule implies, a handful of questions pop up. Can knowing this limit shape our own health decisions? And how do lifestyle and environment factor into each person's heartbeat tally? The notion that mammals are essentially programmed for about a billion beats helps explain why tiny, fast-pacing critters tend to die sooner. Source: BBC Future. As we mull over these ideas, we're inviting you to join the conversation. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and dive into the linked resources if you want to explore the fascinating world of mammal lifespans. Together, let's crack the mystery of the 1 billion heartbeat ceiling and see what it really tells us about life and aging.